What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Trialogue. I've got Ricardo Calviero here, and I've got Ethan Indigo, the fourth initiate. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
So, for those who don't know, my name is Ricardo Calvario. I'm a multidisciplinary researcher, and I'm associated with the Institute for Natural Philosophy that I would invite everyone to go and have a watch, at least to our magazine Pharaohs, for instance, that you can find on the link that is now on the screen. So thank you and welcome to another Trialogue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ethan.
Awesome to be with you guys. This is going to be fun. I am a writer and philosopher and neophyte of many subjects. I'm constantly trying to learn, and I'm available online, all the usual places, and yeah.
Oh, sounds good. So, what we're thinking about this week? What are our topics? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll jump in if you guys don't mind or whatever if you want. I don't think I went first last week. I know we've been.
Oh, but we agree. You only go first at the end of the year, okay? So,
well, we'll pretend it's my birthday or something.
Okay. Just for this time, okay?
Again, I really appreciate being able to communicate with you guys today and always. So one thing I've been thinking about is the circumpunct recently, and it has three parts if you look at it. I can do a little presentation headless of images if I may. If I can. Let's see.
Sorry, it's a raceway out here. Go ahead, if you got it. Well, I wanted to say something about.
Please go ahead.
The circumpunct. I think it's a better representation of duality than all the other symbols of duality that we have. Just because it's the inside and the outside, and that's it, you know.
That's a beautiful concept. I like that. And I share this image as kind of a visualization for some of the kind of this new idea that I was thinking of. Normally, the circumpunct, of course, is depicted as headless just described, without these, or I say without the two pillars, right? This is often used as a Freemasonic circumpunct for as I've seen it described, the vertical pillars here having to do with the solar, and horizontal pillars, if you can imagine, around the circumpunct, top and bottom, having to do with the earth. But in just the circumpunct, we can see, or I conceptualize, three parts, even though it almost is hard to maybe conceive at first, but it has the point, the space, and the ring. And these kind of combine into the fourth. And of course, there's the outside of it too. This is a great meditation tool. It again, not only does it depict the sun and the earth, but it also depicts God and the individual. But like many ideas where there's, were you going to say something?
Do you mind if I nerd out for a second? Because I know this one.
Sorry?
Yeah, in brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's might. I know this one. You're not a big DC fan, are you?
It's right. It's Green Lantern.
Right. That's what he uses to charge his ring.
Symbol. Yeah, duh. Right. That symbol totally is the Green Lantern. Excuse me. And it's just a fascinating combination too, I think, with the two pillars. And let's see if I can share another image. that kind of inspired me to think along these lines. Oh shoot, forgive my ineffective computer skills.
I think that would be really effective with adding another dimension to like mirror magic, using the idea of the two mirrors facing each other to produce a kind of etheric pressure. You would have that idea as well.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, it kind of compounds on itself. And as we look into that meditation tool that could be depicted in any different culture, really, the Sri Yantra, of course, has a center point, and so many mandalas and yantras use the center point not only to begin the art, but for the meditation practice. Here we have another depiction of the two pillars. And there happens to be 3 candles in between them. And so as actually we have discussed on Occult Rejects, I have found the 2 pillars to be sort of this, duality of polarity, I call it. But it can be applicable or considered in many different formations that are all similar to this following idea, and perhaps its most simplest. On one side, you have the destructive force in positive and negative terms. Like electricity, there's a positive and negative connection. And on the other side, you have the creative force in positive and negative terms. And this duality of polarity of 4 forces is really how we can apply ourselves in the world. As we were talking earlier today, actually, I was considering this idea, but again, I didn't want to take over the conversation on a tangent. But we were talking about how people really pursue even being creative in destructive terms, even being productive in very brutalistic kind of takeover or war or assertion of some sort, or there's nothing off the table, so to speak. When in fact there's a whole kind of other way of thinking if we include that creative pillar. And so the circumpunct is a really effective tool, and I think it's also used as a purveyor of, obviously it's used as a purveyor of symbolism, and I think it's used as a kind of mode of secretive communication for different groups.
Well, in the OTO's version of their altar ceremonies, the altar itself has all the different symbols of the east, west, north, and south on it to sort of represent the entire world. So like you were saying, nothing is off the table. That's what they wanted to go for with their symbolism having to do with this center point.
Yeah, so we were recently we were talking about gematria, and of course 322 came up among many other numbers. But because I've been thinking about the circumpunct and some other related ideas recently, as soon as I saw the 322 at that particular point in time, it dawned on me what it meant. And the 322 is a number used for symbolic terms that's kind of left a mystery or an unknown or speculated idea. It's used by the Skull and Bones Society of Yale. And of course, this has had numerous people in their groups. Their group have been very influential on American history, let's say. And so this 322, as soon as I saw it, I've been thinking about this as being mildly interested in secret societies and the Freemasons and so on and so forth. I've been mildly interested in, and but I never conceptualized it as, instead of a 3-2-2, a trinity, polarity, polarity. And when I did that, it dawned on me exactly what they were tapping into. Not that they made up this wisdom, but the wisdom that they were utilizing in that symbolism, I think, is the initiate in the middle that encapsulates the three, like Hermes Trismegistus. And there you could display so many alchemical and esoteric trinities in that, but it's in the center is the individual pursuing self-development, bottom line, like Hermes Trismegistus. And then you have the 2-2, the polarity and secondary polarity of creative and destructive forces, how we really exert will upon the world is through these forces. And to that, the only way that the expression "do as that wilt" is the ultimate. How does it go, Headless?
Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Thank you. The only way that works to be an executable fact of the matter is if you have mastered yourself, akin to the middle initiate that's pursuing balancing these forces with the knowledge of the Trinity, the three worlds, however you might want to put it. There's a bunch of different ways to put the mastery of those three worlds, but that's the only, if you are practicing your will without knowledge and wisdom of self, at least, and let alone the forces that one wields, then it's the shit show materialistic world, combative nature that we have today. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at the 3-2-2.
I like that. I think that there's a lot more to it than we even imagine, especially when considering the idea that magic might be the idea of dropping out of reality, moving into the subspaces beneath reality, and then coming back to it, at the very least consciously. So having that 3-2-2 is kind of a portal of sorts. It's giving you the key on how to move between the worlds. And I think a lot of this has to do with the unknown nature of the heart of these institutions, right? So you get a lot more bang for your buck if everybody's devoted to what they believe it is, whereas it could be something completely different. And who would really know, other than the fact that you're putting your energies into it, and you could see these results later on.
Beautifully said. I just wanted to share this because it's, silly Americana of the very worldly concept that we're talking about. But there is the portal, of course. The two pillars are the portal, certainly, as you say.
Right. And the thematic and artistic elements in this reflect a deeper spiritual nature than what is immediately apparent before you. So, this could be seen as anything from a collection of runes to a series of portals, as well as, a way of documenting the kind of memory palace that they want to create in your mind. And you see all the little holes and all the little vignettes on the side. Those are to make these associations. So you'll see this a lot in very late classical period shadow boxes that they would make for the pagan temples. They would just walk these things around, open them up, and then you would have these initiatory messages right there on the inside. Well, Christianity copied a lot of that, but the elements in this seem to be a little bit more consistent with the early, vignettes with the shadow boxes pre-Christian era.
Yeah, and he's standing on the checkerboard floor, which, of course, there's many different interpretation dimensions of that, as there is with the 3-2-2 and other things. But one of them would be these polarized forces, right, coming together. And
listening. Did you hear Greg Little's episode on the Occult Rejects?
I might have. Did he talk about the squares?
Well, he was talking about how there was a shift in Native American religions towards this path of souls idea that comes directly out of Egypt. And so a lot of the architecture was to reflect the type of path of souls that these Native Americans thought going along these different corridors, like you see here, all the corridorification of this painting, as well as what you have in Egypt. You have the same kind of corridors that lead to this path of souls, and they both directly said that the path of souls ends in the Orion's belt, right? And so they had the same idea of the end point. And then you see stuff like this, which definitely harkens back to these earlier path of souls religions, and they're encompassing it and really focusing in on that.
And I just share this because it's from a monolith in Egypt where this symbol was used, of course, as it's found. It's one of these symbols that's found everywhere. Again, it's so simple but so profound.
I would like to know who did that brown line right through the middle of it, because
that's an interesting question. I don't know what that is nor where that came from. It looks almost like rust, doesn't it?
well, it doesn't look to be as the same age as the stone, right? And it's too straight.
It's very, very right down the middle, isn't it?
Yeah. And why is that the ball in the middle has a cut in it that makes it a 3D element like a sphere?
Yeah, that's definitely purposeful. I don't know if that's post its creation. I don't know about this, the specifics of this object.
Very interesting. I never saw this stone.
Very good eye. You have the monolithic eye.
No, but
the circumpunct is still found in a few different places in Egypt, apparently.
do you associate this with the Omphalos?
Well, I think that it does have the Shiva lingam in it. If you imagine turning this symbol 90 degrees, you might find that instead of a point, it's a line. And instead of a circle, it's a sphere. So it actually is not only phallus symbol, but yoni symbol too.
Well, Mario from Symbolic Studies wouldn't argue with there because he's always talking about how solar symbol is polar symbols, right? And so he keeps talking about how this is all relating back to the pole star. And if you could tell, right there, everything is rotating around this central point like the pole star. All of the worshipers would be gathered around the mound, kind of like a connection to that pole. And then, basically, this is where you get the idea that everything is simultaneously physical and astrological as well. So as above, so below, we sort of encoded into all this polar symbolism and later solar symbolism. But
when you say that, are you speaking specifically of our polar star or to the polar star? Because 6,000 years ago, it starts to be Vega, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's the central axial nature of it. So everything moves around this thing. That's the kind of exit point of the planet, and it has everything to do with Cygnus, one of the constellations near the North Star, and how Cygnus allows you to fly out of this reality, going on the path of souls. Which again, the path of souls, polar symbolism, those are the same thing. So all of those ancient religions followed along with this very, very specifically. And it's too much of a chance of it not happening for there to be contact between the Egyptians and Native Americans. There just has to be, because they worship the identical religion on down to like the spiritual dogs that guard certain places. So how could it not be that? And so when this...
Please continue, sorry.
Well, when the Path of Souls religion sort of took over all of North America, it was right around like 300 BC. which was a really interesting time all around the world as well as in North America. But it seems like that's when the migration or whatever took place was around 300 BC, and then the Path of Souls started building the Adena mounds and all the rest of these giant ones out in Ohio and Pennsylvania, Illinois type areas. I believe so. I could be off by 1,000. No, 3,000 BC. Sorry.
The circumpunct is, of course, can be symbolic of the mound or a mound, right? And I mean, all of Egyptian cosmology starts, well, there's several different versions, but one of them begins with the Ben stone or the primordial mound, right? So I wanted to read this quote, or actually, let me reference it with this: that a point and a line of the four dimensions of geometry, those are both masculine. They have masculine energy, where the circle and the sphere being the optimal volume, has these are both feminine.
So this stone is a male. He has a line.
He's built like a brick, don't they say? I wanted to share this quote by an Alan Leal, who I think is from the 15 or 1600s, where it was very in vogue to claim that some writing that you had was from Hermes, and he attributed this to Hermes Trismegistus. But I think it really kind of illustrates the potentiation that the dot and circle have into a line and sphere. God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. And a lot of Pythagoreans and a lot of people have said very similar concepts.
Well, yeah, I don't understand why people don't understand God, because after listening to a phrase like that, it's pretty clear what God is, right? There's no doubt absolutely whatsoever.
Yeah. And that's well said, Ricardo. And by extension of that, there's no doubt that God is in your center and me and headless at the same time. And not only that, it's at the peak of the mountaintop that we like the most, or what have you. So yeah, it really opens the door to at least be equitable. We need more equitable behavior. So
it's the choice of words that fascinates me. It's the choice of words to create those lines, which basically is saying that God is everywhere. It starts from within and it comes from without, but they find ways to say these things that are pretty but are a riddle in themselves. Right. So again, it's like a code for a connoisseur, because if you have a layman reading those lines, it won't mean anything if they don't have an understanding of certain levels of spirituality or even occultism or practices or whatever. Right. It just it's like it's gibberish, basically.
Yeah, they'll find it redundant. They would think that it was redundant and repetitive and not saying much, when it's actually illustrating whatever you want.
Exactly.
Well, you've also got the angle of what's Hermes always holding in his hand.
Right. There's the staff right in the middle too. Exactly. Is that what you're going to say?
Exactly. He's got the pole. He's got the polar symbol. He's symbolized as a polar god. And so all of these different poles, they start to make sense. Asclepius, he's got the pole as well. It talks about the polar star, that everything in the night sky rotates around as being the most central of all representations of God. And they had to cover that up with something. And so they went to solar symbol instead of worshiping this polar symbol. Now everybody's worshiping the sun. And so there was that shift from the Neolithic period into the Bronze Age of going from polar to solar. And so from there, it's all been sort of downhill since then. But you've got
one of the simplest interpretations of what we call the yin yang symbol is actually would be the grand ultimate pole, not even polarity, but the grand ultimate pole that those swirling energies are going around, and it would be as if there is a circumpunct and they are flowing in and around and from that center.
Right. And you've got the idea of maybe that being a cross section of a much vaster, infinite thing. So you're looking at the inside lines of this pole idea that moves through absolutely everything, as if it was ordering the entire universe in size, shape, and dimension and everything like that. You've got that idea too within Shiva. Shiva is the one who supposedly showed up with this massive pole, and he said, my power extends to the ends of each one of these. And Brahma and his brother tried to go to the ends, and they couldn't find the ends. And so this was the idea of this grand polar center of everything. It's centralism.
Headless, have you read the chapter on the riddle of the Sphinx in the Tao of Thoth? Well, you're gonna really like it in reference to that Hermes carries the staff, the pole.
Absolutely.
I am honored to share that with you guys. That I find the circumpunct to be a really efficient meditative tool to engage mindful focus. It's almost like if I were, I don't want to use this term, but like if I were a Terminator, I envision my sight containing the circumpunct, and it really is a steadying image. So I think it's a powerful mindfulness tool besides the pillars and so forth, just in itself.
I think that was great, and it does. I can understand the focus point. It really it shows.
Yeah, yeah.
Just before we close this, my relating to what you're discussing is what boggles me is you have lots of people living in this planet to this day that have no idea of how astronomy works, right? And these people are seeing the sky, and I don't see anyone starting to think independently, hey, let me start measuring this and then ask my son to measure this. And first of all, what are you measuring? Because it's such a slow process. You have to know beforehand what you are documenting in order to realize that you go 1 degree every 72 years, right? To calculate how the sky moved. But my point is, what was the point where these people that we call primitive decide to sit down and look into the sky and say, oh, look, it's swirling around that point. That is interesting, right? So let's start measuring and take attention to this. So what takes us to do that, since it will not serve any immediate purpose? You see, it's like
I got some answers if you want them from an anthropologist perspective. So imagine that you are an uncontacted tribe, and your entire society consists of having a central leadership place and a central teaching place, and everything is within the kingdom of that center, right? All the things that radiate out from that center represent arms of power, right? So if you think about Tenochtitlan in Mexico, how they built it in the middle of this lake, and at the middle of the lake, they had their connection to God, right? And then you've got the Spanish that show up, and they have a completely different idea of what the center is and where people should be worshiping, and they have to train each and every person into that new mode of seeing the world. Well, what's lost from one section to the other is almost too much to even imagine, because now you might have similar sounding words, but the meanings are completely different because the focus of that society has shifted so dramatically.
Sure, but still, there has to be a beginning, right? There has to be that moment in time that may be happening in several different places of the earth, but in an uncommunicado village or whatever, someone decided to call attention and say, look, these things are moving. In the same way that if you bring an African that has been there, this generation about, I'm talking about in the past, obviously, and he took it to the northern areas of the world, and he sees an aurora borealis. Immediately he was thinking, I'm seeing God or something like that. This is magic in the sky, right? So,
Well, I think what they are doing is having a spiritual experience when they have this type of vision, right? And that's come from generation after generation of human observation. And so it took, symbols like this that had a deeper meaning than just the circle and the dot that occurs to us, for people to unlock that vision and be able to connect with this stuff. And it was perfected over all these different generations of experiencing this stuff firsthand. But then we start living inside and we no longer have that experience. We really don't understand the meaning of these symbols. We have to rediscover them. But if we were in those same circumstances and experiencing the same kind of religious ecstasy that they would experience, you might see the world in a completely different way that would bring this stuff into you. Everybody, right? Lottie dottie, everybody. They're having that same kind of experience because that's the observable universe. And we have to keep rediscovering this every single time.
yeah, because look, you have paleoclimatology to tell you about the landscape, but there is nothing to tell you about the mindscape of these people. We don't know what it was. What was their way of thought, their culture, their goods and bads. We don't know anything about them. What we envision as being used for one purpose, for them might be something completely different. So it's very hard because all our interpretations are based, I don't know, in a 500-year process of our mindscape, more or less. So it's very hard to get to. That's why all of this symbolic elements are all made of layers. They don't have just one meaning. They have lots of them, and they use it accordingly because they know that have several meanings, and they use them. Well, they separate themselves from levels, I think, for instance. So the higher level you are, the more you take from the same symbol, for instance. So,
may I point out one last thing in reference to the tripart that is the circumpunct that becomes a whole new fourth part theoretically. In cosmology, we might interpret the movement of the spheres as actually being like a circle, right? We in our society often think of time as being a line. Sometimes we know that it moves in cycles, of course, but the ring actually, I think, represents time. And the space, of course, represents space. And the point represents mind of God and mind of Ricardo and whoever else is watching. So I think it also beckons with that three-part idea to where does this almost this cliche come from of mind, body, spirit? What does that even mean? But well, if you look at it in relation to the center point, the space, and the time, and so mind, space, time, it actually has more kind of power, I think.
I got something for you. If it's four part, right? So inside space, outside space, inside dot, outer circle. That would be the four parts, right? Then you could understand the use of this symbol as everything, right?
There you go. Yeah,
it's almost like
we're
inside
what it's
that.
said to symbolize. It's been said to symbolize the everything in multiple different cultures and times.
yeah,
Right.
and perhaps even that every individual is at the center of the universe. Perhaps
that is it. Oh, absolutely. In the same sense that the point can represent, or the totality of the symbol can represent God and you, either
Right.
and both.
Well, I think there's a missing element that is kind of blatant to me, but I think that the idea of the known and the unknown are fully encompassed in this idea. The space on the inside of that thing, that would be the known. The space on the outside, that would be the unknown. And everything that exists inside of this known is having a tremendous amount of influence from the place that is unknown. And that idea of that place that is unknown, the unobservable, that gives you the idea of this observer effect, right? And the observer effect only goes inside of our field of vision. But when you tap into the energy of the unknown, of the stuff around the outside, you're talking about bringing in the vast majority of the amount of power that you would need to accomplish anything, right? This is like a high-level magical user would have a deep connection to this source of unknown energy. And it has to remain unknown for it to have the same kind of potency that you would expect it to. This is why you see all of these ghosts and demons or whatever that try to manifest. Part of their body is always missing, right? They might be missing a hand. They might be missing feet. The idea is they remain in contact with this unknown energy. And then you've got stuff like dark matter, right? What exactly are they sensing there? It's all related to something outside of our field of vision. If you were to put it into a matrix concept, this would be the stuff that's making up the stuff that's making up the stuff. So all that pre-layer that would be necessary to run with this type of resolution. So
that's beautiful. May I add a complex presentation and concept, but it's really actually quite simple, but sometimes it's a tongue twister and a brain bender. Off of the known and unknowns, I don't want to be Rumsfeldian, so I won't go into putting these together. But he did not mention one aspect of the combination of these ideas, and that is the unknown knowns. And this is exactly to have this, what you're just talking about, this, kind of things that we obtain through intuition that are not verifiable, but somehow we know them and we don't even know from where we know them. And so intuition, the unknown knowns, these are a really powerful set of this. Again, I don't want to be Rumsfeldian. I'm sure the audience knows about it or can look it up. But
I think he was right. What he was doing is he was being raw and honest. That's what he was doing.
I don't mean to say he was wrong. I just don't want to, suggest to people that that's where I got this from. I think it's a really important dynamic that he mentioned, but importantly, crucially, he did not mention this fourth unsaid, which is from where you could express that intuition and these other kind of ideas are in that line anyway.
Sure, and that's where routine comes in. Sorry, it's quick. That's where routine comes in, because routine kills that process. It takes the invention out of course
he would not mention it. Yeah, of course he would not mention it, and the powers that be would not mention it, because we might know when we're being lied to more frequently if we consider that fourth unsaid in that dynamic, which is a powerful one, and you nailed it.
Right. So I think there's so much more to this topic, but
there's so much more to the circumpunct. And look at it. Look how simple it is.
Right? and this concept was later used in maps. The concept of the known and of the unknown was well represented in the ancient art of creating cartography. So they used it a lot, and that's where the expression comes from, and there'll be dragons, because beyond that line we don't know what monsters lay ahead. And if you imagine certain I've been watching some photos of islands, and small islands, more rocks, big rocks on the ocean, and when you look them from afar, imagine that you are on a ship, people highly superstitious, the haze in the air, or the how you call it, the fog, and you see that shape in the distance. It's like a huge monster. So turn the helm to the other side. I don't want to go there. And so in the map will be there's a gigantic monster in there. So They didn't go there because they were highly superstitious. Even if the commander want to go there, the people that work on the boats, they had lots of strange beliefs in this initial times of the 15, 1600s, 1700s. And they didn't go near this type of structures because they believed they were monsters.
Well, I believe there's more to it than that. If you want me to get into it real quick. So
Sure.
there, at a 60-degree offset on either side of the moon, there are these huge clouds of this plasmified dust, right, that travel in unison with that moon as it goes across the sky. And at those 60-degree angles coming off of the moon, those are the best magnetic places for this plasma, this dusty plasma, to accumulate. Another word for dusty plasma is conscious plasma, because they've witnessed so many different effects having to do with low gravity, low temperature, very, very high magnetic environments that produce these dusty plasmas that we see all over our universe. And so we've got two of these dusty plasmas hanging out in the shadow of the moon as it travels around us. And it's conscious, and it's kind of talking to us in a way. And so you get these constant effects on full moons. You get these other things that don't seem related to the moon or energy at all coming from the natural sources that might actually be coming from these unnatural sources, these sort of pockets of energy. So if you can imagine that having an influence over human society that we can't necessarily put our finger on as, you know, either good or evil, because it's kind of this trickster idea. You've got all these different dual archetypes having to do with monsters, Celia, Charybdis. You've got all these different two pairs of monsters that come up over and over again in human mythology. And it's like there's something about these kind of, well, I mean, I don't want to rip off Jin or anything. He always talks about these two dragons all the time that are in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, directly corroborating this, you know, dusty plasma. But if you take those ideas and you see how they affect different things like astrology and what a person is named, you know, these are effects that can eventually snowball out of control if you've got enough control over them. So you take these events like Trump getting shot. It seems like something intervened there, like something is happening on this level that we can't necessarily understand. A lot of people say it's fake. I'm saying it's really hard to fake a bullet flying in mid-flight. You know, something was happening there.
But you can. I see it many ways. So it can either be something we don't know, a third party. It could be the opposition and it failed, or it could be someone from his own side with whom they had lots of trust that he will nib an ear, but it's a small sacrifice in order to gain a lot of popularity. But it takes a lot of trust. A lot of trust.
There's a lot of examples throughout history of things like the Black Plague, you know, how they said that these people would take the Black Plague from town to town. And why were they getting rid of all these people? What were they depopulating Europe for? These things didn't make a lot of sense then. They still don't make a lot of sense now, but we see the pattern reoccurring over and over and over again. It's almost like there's a group of people who are controlled by this stuff, you know?
Oh, yeah. And regarding the moon, I'm not sure you know this. Have you ever filmed the moon for about, I don't know, 15 minutes?
Yes, sir.
So I've seen 20 years ago movies of people talking about the refresh of the moon. That is a line that starts on top of the moon, and you can see the line going, and it's like the moon is refreshing. It's like the frame rate of the moon is refreshing. So I did record not a year ago the rising of the moon, and when I was watching my footage, right at the end, when almost in the last few 4 or 5 seconds that I was closing to end the shot, I saw the refresh of the moon on my footage. And it's different when it's your footage and not someone on YouTube showing you footage of that happening. So and that's because I don't think it's a false thing. I find it even more curious, like a shield, not as the moon being refreshed in a matrix, but like a shield around the moon.
The best time to view moon anomalies is when the sun is coming up and the moon is setting. Because what you'll find is that these colors that are being generated do not match up. So you'll sometimes see times where you'll have clouds pass behind the moon, right? And it's like, how is that happening there? The sky around the moon will be considerably darker than the rest of the sky as the sun is coming up. And it's like, how could the sky around that be so much darker than the entire rest of the sky? There's something going on with the moon at dawn that just totally throws off, like it's really small things, but you can tell that there is a difference in the quality of light coming from that thing during other times, because it's really hard to get resolution at these times when you've got all of these different colors converging at the same time.
And when it's there, it's when it has to cross more of the atmosphere. So that will capture any kind of pollutants or anything in the air, dust, and that will change the color of the moon. So
the clouds going behind the moon is something to watch for, though.
Yeah, I never saw. That I never saw.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. Because, I mean, I could see it as a trick of the light, Like maybe there's enough reflection coming from the moon to make that cloud fade out. Right? Maybe, but that still doesn't really cover the entire explanation. Because like you'll get a sliver of moon and you'll see a cloud go right through there and there's no more moon on the inside. You expect to see that the rest of the moon in sort of a darker shadow. It's not there. And it's like, I think it has something to do with the optical nature of resolution in this amount of, I guess, data space that we exist in.
This matrix basically
might be overtaxing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just the best time to have the transfer, because maybe if it is just inherent to our light spectrum, that would be the best time when it's dimly lit outside and you're not really paying attention to the sky. But if you are paying attention to the sky, you will see amazing things that just don't make sense in your head.
Yeah, but with so many telescopes for so many years looking at the moon, now less, but back then there was so many, and no one talked about it ever, right?
Yeah, they did.
No. I mean, from the 30s, 40s, 60s, you don't have reports of that.
Yeah, during our time. Yeah, but I'm talking about the ancient world. They documented all these anomalies. Sundogs. I mean, like they had all sorts of different names for these things and their effects on the world around them. And all that stuff got lost in the shuffle of materialism. It's like, well, it can't be doing that because we can't see it the same way they did. They didn't even see the color in the ocean the same way we do today. I mean, that colors almost all the rest of your perceptions. And I think all of this does really have a lot to do with perceptions.
Yeah, well, that's that question. Is it the sea that reflects the sky, or is it the sky that reflects the sea? but since the sea doesn't cover the whole planet, it must be the sea that reflects the sky, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So,
well, go ahead. Did you have your video you wanted to show?
Yeah. I'm gonna share my screen. It's 9 minutes, so I'm gonna fast forward it just to make my question.
All right.
You want to tell us a bit about it or surprise us?
So this is this is an asteroid. This is the simulation of an asteroid, like the size of the one that for 6 times destroyed all life on Earth, all of it. So I'm trying to fast forward this. It will look as moving very slowly because it's very big, although it's very fast. So it impacts. So this is the first interesting point, is that he's ripping the crust. The crust is being lifted and the islands disappear, literally, because they are on the crust. They are not attached very well, so it rips that off completely. Okay. So in time, then after that, you have all this debris that was sent over starting to fall as meteorites, and then you have this ball of fire that will englobe everything in 24 hours. Everything burns before this gets there. Everything melts. The crust melts completely. Okay. So my question is, how is it that after such a thing, life has emerged at least 4 of those 6 times? Because I don't know if there was life on the first 2. So
I'd say there could be
can
many.
we actually, whoa, stop sharing. Can we actually talk about evolution considering this?
Sure, I think it's in the realm of possibility, but who knows? Who knows really what happened, right? I mean, it could have been the same thing 4 times, maybe, or it could have been influenced by a couple of different things, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
but the theory of evolution is based on millions of years,
mhm.
right? So would it happen 4 times millions of years?
All the
I
same
mean,
way.
it's. I don't. I just am not being an absolutist. I'm not trying to argue for it. I'm just saying it's within the realm
I'm
of.
just saying, isn't it creationism? And when I speak about creationism, I'm not talking about a god or aliens. I'm talking about asteroids, meteorites that carry elements for life or anything of the sort. But something had to restarted it, because when you watch this documentary, they are very clear saying that nothing survives, no seeds, no animal, nothing, because the crust is
On the
melted.
surface. But
Oh,
what about underneath? And what about like have you ever looked
no,
into
no, the surface is melted.
no, I said not on the surface. What about underneath? Is I just posited the question again. I'm not trying to represent any position.
Okay,
This is
if
out of
we
my
include the inner earth, if we include the inner earth ideas and agartha and all of that, they could repopulate the world.
no,
Yeah,
no, I'm
sure.
not even including that. I'm just including that there is something underneath. I'm not even saying that there's Dagartha. I'm just saying something was maybe survived underneath, way underneath. I'm just positing the possibility. I really wouldn't be
I could
sick.
get behind that, but even at the rate that it would have to repopulate the earth, there would have to be an incredible amount of intelligence within that plant and fungal life that might survive. You know, there would have to be an incredible amount of design put into them to evolve
Sure,
at
but
such a amazing pace.
imagine that you know it's going to happen. So you take a swap of every single animal, and you take a swap of every single human, or whatever you want to call it, right? And it happens, and you have the technology to bring it all back again, right? So that's why you store seeds, that's why you store DNA, that's why you store all of this stuff, so you can later on replicate it. So it's
Can I,
just doing a little comeback to the conversations we just had today.
let me pose 2 questions relevant to what we're discussing, just for what ifs. Apparently, many different astronauts have noted there to be flying snakes in the upper
Yeah.
atmosphere. This is
Yes,
not me being crazy and stoned. I'm just quoting what other people have noted. So
they're
maybe
called rods. They're their name, rods.
there was atmospheric life when something like this occurred. I'm just speculating. And also, another speculation is that scientists really don't know what's up with octopuses. They're sort of an biological anomaly.
Yeah,
Uh,
but the sea boils, and even the salt
no,
disappears.
no, no, my no. Of course, I understand this. My point is that octopuses are postulated and hypothesized to have arrived from outer space, not to have
Yes.
developed on planet Earth. So and there may have been upper atmospheric life and that did what it had to do, and I don't know that some survived, and there may have been octopuses incoming.
Sure, I don't doubt it. But the fact is, I'm going to take that, because you didn't see in the octopuses arrived. Let's imagine how many million years ago. They didn't evolve, did they? They are very smart, but they didn't evolve.
apparently they have a different evolutionary track that scientists speculate might not have happened here. But I'm too ignorant to say for certain. But it's an interesting. It's very interesting, and they definitely
It
look like
is. It is.
aliens.
But
So, and yeah,
but
I don't think we could know really, too, right? And then we were speaking about the moon earlier. How much of the moon just doesn't add up? And again, I'm not the smartest cat in the kennel, but a lot of smarter people than I have pointed out that the moon, the facts about it make certain things that we theorize about moons questionable. There's a lot of anomalies.
oh, sure, sure. So if you're curious about that, I can send you my 3 or 4 part paper on the moon.
I know.
With,
Oh,
with
I know. You know. I'm just
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
Barry. You break it down right now. Let them know. You know better than I.
Well, in terms of science, the thing that they don't tell us about the moon is they tell us that it has 16% gravity compared to the Earth. So they call it gravity surface factor of 16%. But in reality, the this value is a minimum of 64 to 66%. And this changes everything radically because it changes what is called the neutral point. That is the place where you have to stop accelerating and start decelerating to reach the moon. And that's why so many missions failed, because this is not a known information. In fact, they didn't share it. China crashed in the moon several times or missed it because they didn't know. They were still using that 16% factor gravity, and it isn't true. And so if you think about this 66% or 64% of the surface gravity of the Earth, and you bring the moon closer, as we know it has been, and I'm not even going to touch how fast it moved there or how it could possibly move closer or further away from the Earth, but if you move it closer to the Earth, what it happens is the factor of gravity on the Earth is decreased by the 64% surface gravity factor of the moon, which means you can justify the biggest of the dinosaurs, you can justify enormous trees, and you can justify that in a time so remote that those trees would look like mountains today that are petrified and they only see the stumps, basically. So the fact that in South America there are people believing on the Earth's expansion, so that this is the third or fourth Earth, and the Earth grew in size, and each time it grew in size, the animals became smaller because the gravity was stronger. I see this instead of being the Earth expanding, because if we talk about accretion, and I look into this, the Earth loses more or less exactly the same that it gains on accretion from being rotating on space and taking on to particles. So the same thing that it gains, it loses. So it wouldn't grow or shrink as most people think it would happen. So the only justification for that is bring the moon closer. If you bring the moon closer, and it's still going away at 3 centimeters a year, more or less. But if you bring it closer, then you can have all of these things that there is no scientific justification how a brontosaur could stand its weight, because by our laws.
May I ask
Sorry.
Ricardo? I don't mean to interrupt your flow. How does the Earth lose particles? I understand how we gain particles. How do we lose?
We are constantly losing material into space.
Think about all the dust that's being blown into the atmosphere, and then eventually. But there's also the idea of the dusty plasma again, because dusty plasmas are a little bit stronger than the atmospheric tug of the gravity. So it's getting caught up there in that Oort cloud and being energized. It's not the Oort cloud. What's it called? The thing that the astronauts can't get through. What's that called?
Oh, see, the Van Allen belt.
Van Allen belt, that's full of this dust, right? And it's highly charged. So between the Van Allen belt, Rahu and Ketu, which is what they call the north node and south node of the sun, which intersect with the solar ecliptic going across the sun, They knew something that we don't know, but apparently they knew about this plasma. So,
So if
weird.
there's a big storm in the Gobi Desert, the Chinese dust storms that are so crazy, some of that doesn't fall. All of it doesn't fall back down. Some of it goes
Some of
out
it
of.
is lost. Yes, that
Also,
and explosions,
we have
volcano. Sorry,
right volcanoes.
Volcano.
That's a big one. But
Okay. Yeah,
also,
I didn't know that it didn't come back down. Thank you for sharing that.
there are, excuse me, there are gases in our atmosphere that are coming from the Earth that actually weigh less than the atmosphere itself. So it keeps on going once it hits the atmosphere.
exactly.
Good. That's another one. Thank you.
So it's like when you go and study, for instance, how the Himalayas are growing. They say about this 2.3 centimeters a year or something like that. The problem is that erosion takes almost as the same. So
Sure.
the actual grow, it's much less because erosion sometimes it's even faster than what it grows, right? So yeah, the idea of it expanding Earth, to me, I'm not saying it's false, but I'm just saying that's not the one that I'm more inclined to right now. And the moon is much simpler because we know that the moon was much closer. And if you bring the moon much closer, even a megalithic site would be easier to build because the stone would weigh a third of the weight.
Perhaps I was ignorant of the fact that it balances that out. It's balanced out with what the Earth loses with what comes in.
Yeah.
Because in certain places the sediment does seem to grow, but it's not growing. It's just piling on top of. It's not growing overall. It's just piling on top of. Making that sedimentary, layer of time, if you will.
And sediment is mostly created by materials already on the Earth that are transported by alluvial movement or cataclysm or.
We haven't even talked about the other strange effects that the moon has on live beings. Like all these different animals are on a lunar calendar, and they
even humans.
Even humans. And there's really no testifying at all for how the moon is influencing these cycles within nature. Other than
there is. There is. I studied it and I found several papers. The problem is you have one or two papers saying, here are the results. We studied this on this group of people, and they all have clear differences on full moon and new moon in terms of activity, resistance,
what type
health.
Of people?
Sorry?
I'm sorry. You said this type of people have differences.
No. This group of people that we studied resulted with changes during new moon and full moon, with lower heart pressure, lower blood pressure, more resistance in training, more clairvoyance, more stamina. They tested from athletes to normal people, and they get these results. And then after that study comes out, there comes 3 Volter groups saying, okay, but we already put all these people here also on the same test, and we have 0 results. Absolutely nothing. We have a little change in the sugar, but that might be because the person was taking something before. So each time a study comes out showing that these people showed no differences because of the moon or anything that may be considered esoteric, no matter how credible the scientists are, it comes immediately with 2 or 3 tests right after saying, no, this is not because our results are completely null. And I can send you the papers because I did it for that research of the moon. And that's why I say in the video, science is serving 2 masters. And while you're serving 2 masters, you can never get to the truth because you're not after the truth. You're just following orders.
It's amazing.
Go ahead, Ellis.
Well, I was going to say it's amazing how they've defined the aperture on human perception so finely, that it's this far and no further. We are the materialists. We will tell you from which side of the box to the other you're allowed to think in.
That's basically what I was going to say in so many words, that because the implications of the moon being influential opens up all these questions that are perception expansive, in the sense that, wait, what else am I affected by energetically? The moon is so far away. How is that affecting me? And how are these other What
have
is what is?
I have a documentary where a guy went looking for police stations and fire departments to understand if people got a little bit more crazy in full moon, for instance. And the reports from police stations generally show an increase of 15 to 30% of crime during full moon and new moon. The problem is when that goes to the study department, when the guy reaches the study department to look for these files, the only answer that he has is we have no records of any change whatsoever during any phase of the moon. It's always the same thing because they create a statistic and the statistic makes it all even. So there's nothing to report. The only thing we have is the individual reports of the station that are all compiled and they are not watched in a statistic manner. It's the policemen that know, well, I do have more service when it's full moon. Otherwise, I was sitting in the station for 4 or 6 hours, and in the full moon, I'm constantly going out, and we don't are not enough for the service. So all of that is suppressed. Because if people start believing that the moon would give them powers, how long would they give the jump to the supernatural and to witches and to sorcerers and all
I
of
got a
that?
better one for you. This is very, very helpful when it comes to investing. If you could start telling when people are going to invest more poorly based off of, dilations in this energy field, then you can certainly make better moves on those dates and plan when those dates are coming up.
It's no accident that the rich use what would be called oracles today to decide when they spend money or when they don't. Even some of them are so fanatic, they even to travel or anything at all, they go and see if it is auspicious or not. So who's wrong? Is them or us?
I always say you got to go for what works. And if you see them doing something, then you got to basically figure it out. Because if you don't, they've got something that works and you don't.
And to the four realms of information, the unknown unknowns and the known knowns and so on, they're working with those known unknowns. They're working with that subtle realm in doing the oracle or astrological investigations, right? They're working in intuition and insight and psychic realm.
And before we finish this subject, I don't know if you know Shaman 777. I think that's the name on X.
Sounds familiar.
His name is Jason, and he has shown me a lot of very interesting geology. In fact, he shows everyone. And he showed me boulders. I don't know if you ever seen how metal is folded to make a Japanese katana. Have you ever seen?
Well,
yeah, it takes
sure.
about 7 folds.
Yeah, that equals to 1,300 layers more or less, because it's then hammered and creates layers and so on. So you see those pieces of metal that are folded on top of one another, and you see the rock that is showing me. The rock has these layers in the rock. It's a gigantic boulder. So on Earth, what kind of force on that area could create such kind of geology? You have huge pieces of metal stuck between two gigantic boulders, two sheets of metal. You have one that has a circular structure that is metallic inserted into the rock. Another rock that is all folded like it was melted and then spread like you would spread, some kind of cream on top of it in layers. So what kind of forces would create such a thing? It has to be an event like those that I've been showing, in less scale, of course, but
What about
creating the same effect locally.
What about lightning or sprites? Like 1,000 years of sprites exploding on that mountaintop.
It would.
I'm just positing. Again, I don't know anything.
Have you ever seen what lightning does to stone?
Not exactly. No, nothing.
It just blows it. It's like an explosion.
Wow.
So and the rock that remains gets magnetized. That's why the Olmecs always quarry on places that were struck by lightning, and that's why they're big heads and they're small statues, and all of that material is magnetic. They choose it.
And I'm sure you're familiar with the whole electric universe theory, where
Yes.
they posit all these potential blasts. What about would that have done it?
Look,
Plasma strike?
the EU ideas only have one problem, is the fact that they try to justify, not all, but most try to justify every single thing with the electric universe. And if we abandon all the rest, if we abandon all the rest that we know from geology, right, what are we doing? We cannot explain everything with one single theory. What they should be doing is, look, that place might be explained by this.
This could
not
happen in places,
not
right? Yeah,
not all of it
that's
is
how I
caused by
consider
that.
it. But again, I'm
Yeah,
ignorant.
that's the problem, because it's good idea. It's a very good idea, and in certain places, it's the best explanation.
Sure.
By far the best explanation. But you cannot fold stone by the use of electric energy, because it involves a lot of pressure, a lot of heat, and it has to be a lot of violence. Not a discharge. Even if the discharge takes an hour in the ground, he couldn't do that. It would just cause a melted area on the stone that equals the lightning.
Maybe you think it was struck by a meteorite, or
It has to be. It has to be. We don't know any other type of destructive force, because volcanoes won't do that.
It's local. This particular place was localized.
It's all shattered. Gigantic balls shattered, completely shattered, and all this enormous with this kind of strange layers into
in a space of about what meters?
Well, this is found in about, I don't know, a square mile, maybe more.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I bet it was
maybe more. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's a lot of places like this, so it was a big event wherever it happened. There in Alabama, it was a big event for sure that caused this. It's impressive. You find metal melted into porcelain. You find metal inside the stone, in small stones. All of these weird artifacts that very, very, very strange. Whatever happened there, it was not the waters from the Younger Dryas. Water wouldn't do that.
As you're describing this, it makes me think that the Tungsta event was certainly not a meteorite, because whatever happened, it didn't emblaze the whole area. There were trees, of course, knocked down. Everything was impacted, but it wasn't on fire.
No. What happened in Chicxulub is exactly what you saw. Is exactly what you saw in the smaller scale. The wave of impact circled the Earth, I don't know, 30 times, maybe more. But
why did trees catch a fire?
Because the wave of impact, it cools as it travels. It was not as big as the one that we saw. It's a much smaller one.
So it probably didn't even hit the Earth. It was an upper atmosphere explosion.
No, it did hit the Earth, but where it hit it in Chicxulub, if you go to a map and you look at the breccia, you see that the whole floor in a massive area is fragmented. All of it is broken to pieces. All of it. So it was a huge impact that actually collided. So it evaporated the water. It burned everything before the heat got there, before the flames, because the heat was traveling in front of the flames. It burned everything, but it was a smaller thing. So a bigger than the Burckle crater that caused the deluge, but smaller than, much smaller than what we just saw on the footage. But it did burn everything on its path, but it didn't reach the whole. It didn't even reach the whole America. So I think it barely passed into North America. But the wave shock, the shock wave did do that. So if you think that Tunguska gave 6 times around the Earth, it was recorded circling the Earth 6 times, the shock wave. So this is much bigger than Tunguska, of course. Headless, what do you have for us today?
Well, I have a list of lithium salts that I think a lot of people might not know about. So lithium salts are compounds containing lithium that are used primarily for psychiatric medication, along with treating bipolar disorder and major depressive disorder. Common lithium salts include lithium aspartate, lithium orotate, lithium gluconate. Lithium carbonate is considered the gold standard for treatment due to its extensive research and effectiveness. Lithium salts work by affecting the flow of sodium through the nerve and muscle cells. Does that sound like it's doing anything for depression?
Look,
Which influences
please
mood regulation.
explain how does the body absorb the lithium?
Good question.
Well, some of those were sugars, and I think so. I think they simulate sugar. It sounds like
Lithium aspartate. That's a different
Yeah.
type of,
And
salt.
glufosinate, you said too also.
It was glutamate.
Glutamate, yeah, that's sugar.
Yeah. Well, they've got monosodium glutamate, which is a type of, I think it refers to the crystal shape. So lithium carbonate, that would be a type of carbon crystal.
If I remember correctly, from one of the books from Carl Sagan, there was a guy that had a serious problem. And what they decided to do was separate the two brains. So they opened his head and they cut the cerebrum. There is a part inside of the brain, and they separated the left from the right. So he had to relearn how to write, how to walk. He had to relearn all of that stuff. But it worked. He ceased to have the attacks. He became a more normal person, and so on. So my question is this: what does the lithium? Do humans produce lithium naturally? For start, because I think not.
I've got some answers on that. Different lithium salts may vary in absorption rates and side effect profiles. For example, lithium citrate is absorbed faster but can have higher side effects, while lithium orotate is marketed as an OTC dietary supplement in the US but lacks FDA approval for treating medical conditions. Yeah, they know how long they get absorbed for and they can see the effects, but it's not saying anything about their toxicity.
But does the human body produce lithium?
No.
These are
so we are not ready to absorb it.
These are all related to pharmacological curatives for whatever for depression.
Very strong drugs, in other words.
I hope no one's dealing with depression because it's awful. And
yes, it is.
I would suggest, I mean, we pursue all avenues of help for everything that we deal with, but also we're not going to get external help for an internal problem. And that's a big kind of thing to say, but I think it's applicable to society, right? Like we look for an external person to give us an external thing that will be applicable to our problem instead of get some increased oxygenation, like increase your oxygen intake. That can literally change your whole posture of your body and mind state. And so
it's not just that, but you remember while we were talking on the previous episodes, about how this stuff is used to induce chemical reactions inside of your immune system that causes it to go nuts. I mean, that's what the lithium salts are doing. It's creating these, long-term diseases that are related to immune functionality. Nobody's talking about that because they think they got the chemistry all figured out. You remember that study a couple of years ago? There was no chemistry. We just made it up, guys.
Look, I will not, this is not what I was saying, but I will never forget this. When he was asked, so why did you stop the testing? And he says, because the animals were dying. Oh, so that's why you approved it. But
lithium salts are also a very important component in rat poison. But I'm not sure which type.
Like aspartame and aspartame K, that goes on sodas. But yeah, I think I forgot what I was going to say with the joke.
I break down the word depression as with pressure, right? You got pressurization, and when you're not pressurized, you're depressed. So I think sometimes just imagining that we're more full of chi is sometimes helpful, but really getting more oxygen can, or even your vitamins and your foods, but sometimes it's as simple as like sunlight and oxygen, the things we can't even hold.
I like the Japanese word for depression. The sad flu.
Sad flu, yeah.
Yeah. They call it the sad flu because they created it over there. They wanted it to be marketed as something that can go from person to person that makes you upset and sad.
That whole story reminds me of the very idea of reaction as opposed to respond. As soon as you see that it's possible to be in that place, you might react it because it's all an act, right? And like for years, as you describe it, Headless, or maybe centuries, the idea of depression was not really in the mindset of Japanese people, right? And so as soon as it became like a thing, then other people started reacting. And often we'll be in such patterns, maybe because time, place, or person that we're around. We might be reacting also, and that word, I mean it by being an actor or actress again. But so I always say, just try to respond, then react. It's a pattern breaker, and it's your own interpretation of that.
Right. But I think the whole issue is that we've always sort of responded a little bit too late, because it seems like we keep on these trajectories over and over again. It's because we're focused on trying to make things better for ourselves, but we don't understand how that's actually contributing to our downfall. I think all of these systems run off of the idea of human weakness as being something exploitable. And we've been more than happy to throw money at the people who believe that, and basically our entire society is set up around that. Because, as inflation picks up, you're more and more desperate for that next dollar coming in because that last dollar isn't worth as much. So you've got this whole idea of the fish rotting from the head, and all these bad ideas take shape in material culture that we see around us.
Yeah, but we forgot how to hunt, how to survive on
It
the
shifts
wild.
your mindset. It completely shifts how you see the world,
That's why Dave Matthews has a song that says, "I'm a humble monkey that decided to climb down the tree and move into the city. So now I'm a sad monkey living on the street." And I miss the times where I was jumping from branch to branch, tree to tree. So,
I swear to God, there's a Harley rally every time I start podcasting.
they know, don't they?
I think they do. They're fans of mine.
Can't hear it.
You have to look for a light. There must be some light of reflected on the binnacles or the telescope that they are using to know that you are podcasting. So look for that on the window.
That's good. Make me more paranoid. That's exactly what I need.
Oh, don't worry. They have a new thing now. It's lithium.
Ah, yeah. Lithium salts, baby. Let's go.
You take that and you don't bother to anything else.
Break the chain of the sad flu. We don't need any more victims. You got to take the drugs to get rid of the sad flu.
Yeah, but who has time? Who has time to treat these people that have depression? Who has the time? The family doesn't have time. The kids don't have time. The doctors
One can only
need
help
time.
Is the really like horrible what is it the diagnosis. One can only help oneself through that, because we are really reacting, because how we feel is usually based on external factor instead of our internal stasis. And as soon as you can do that, and that's the diagnosis that you have to do that, then things can be more steady and balanced. Like as Ricardo remarked, and you guys might joke, I'm often a Taoist, and their whole state of being is kind of like, aren't you happy that you did this or that this happened? Yeah. Oh no, aren't you upset that this is happening? And so just looking for this stasis rather than peaks and valleys is if that's not a lesson from the yin yang, right, to just be in that comfort level wherever we are in the cycle, but not getting too into it, because it's going to come around. What goes around comes around.
Yeah, but look, we are in a society where I see most people, and that's what I was discussing not so long ago. People cannot live in doubt. They cannot stand doubt.
Isn't that
And
weird? Yeah.
they have to have a certainty. Even that certainty has no basis whatsoever beyond the belief that's the choice. It's not a belief, it's a choice, because they don't understand it, so they cannot judge it. And so if they cannot judge it, it is a choice. And that's what I was talking about. When people today don't have knowledge, they only have opinions. And so they defend these opinions without any knowledge of what they are defending, beyond the choice that they made. This is the person that is saying the correct thing. Like those that choose the electric universe, or those that choose Trump, or those that choose a basketball team, or whatever. It's an opinion because they don't have the time to delve into the subject, like the climate change matter. People don't have the time to delve into the data and understand that this is all a fraud. They have to make a choice. And so, according to their own life, they choose a side that allows them to continue living. Is this a conscious choice? For some, maybe, but for most, it will be an unconscious choice. It's like survival. So this leads us to a people that are extremely opinionated. Everyone has I almost said a swear. So everyone has an opinion, right? But no one knows what they're talking about, because it's just so these people are fighting with one another and never enter in any detail of what they are debating. So they choose to attack the person that is speaking and not the subject, because they have nothing to do about the subject besides the saying that they agree with that. Sorry, it was long, but
I get what you're saying. And it's I think an interesting problem with the world. Do people continue learning in Portugal? Because in the United States, most people don't mostly genuinely keep on learning a thing. And if you're not learning, you don't realize how little you know, right? And if you don't admit that, like the great philosophers of the past that we still note and quote, if you don't admit that you don't know the totality of things, look what you end up doing. I'll quote my dear old dad: the hardest thing that most people do in life is learn a language. And so if you don't continue learning, it puts your mindset in a really, or at least in the mind state that you are learning, right? I think maybe that's the trick too, right? That engagement. I mean, they note that this is one way to engage longevity for elders, is to continue learning something. It doesn't matter what it is, to continue the mind state of learning. And I think a lot of people, when they're adult or an adult, people will assume that they know things, instead of, I need to consider this in the fact that I probably don't know the totality of it, and let me not make assumptions.
Look, the standards are so low right now that you look an expert by buying a national magazine, reading an article, and then going to the office and start telling about it to people. That's how low the standards are, because
those professional people do not learn extra. they stick to their jobs, and their jobs don't include learning more, so they don't learn.
And they are encouraged to do so, to not learn more. They're encouraged not to learn.
It's really sad.
It's like a teacher. If you now imagine that you are a teacher and you are going to teach philosophy or history, and you are all excited because you have all these ideas how to present things and how to put them to think and how to put them to debate one another, and then you receive the manual that you have to give. You say, what is this? What are you telling me to teach these children? So, and then you have to stick with it. And after 3 years teaching the same thing, you are consumed by the system. You might excite one or two students if you still have the spirit, but it will be ridden off you, because that's your job. That's what you have to do. No more, no less. That's just follow what's in the book.
It's really true. It's really sad, but I mean, there are ways around this, and I think people are starting to discover them in bits and pockets. You're starting to see a lot of this stuff spring back up. But if we can avoid having a big pole shifter and big natural disaster, I think we might get through it okay, because it's not looking good for the other side that only knows how to distract, only knows how to deceive. Like, people are done with that, you know?
Look, I've been debating that for 20 more years now. That is, I have a friend that thinks that there is awakening, that the people are becoming aware and understanding that the system, that something is going on, and so on. And I disagree. I think that there's a lot more people talking about these things, but is it that we have now means for those people that are proactive to come to the new social medias and start talking about this stuff? How many of those people know anyone that agrees with them and it's listened to them and decided, you were right, I'm another one on your group? Most people that I talk to say, no one wants to talk to me. I'm the only guy. So what I see is there are more people aware, of course, but the number is not staggering. I think it's more related to the fact that these people that are proactive, that want to help, want to have an impact, or want to just transmit this to others to have the choice to decide for themselves, are coming to social media on all fronts and debating these things. Now, are we more because of that? I'm not sure if that's true. Moreover, there's so many nets on the system to capture these people that are awakening, that they are quickly deviated into a new rabbit hole that will consume them, and they will be oblivious to all the rest. So again, the multidisciplinary aspect of including everything from spirituality to science to whatever, it doesn't happen because people tend to focus on one thing, because they don't have the interest on the overall. They have a specific interest, and that's explored by the system too, I think.
I agree. Well, this has been a great episode. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me again this Sunday. I think right here is a good place to end it. We got a lot of information in there, a lot of stuff to think about, and we'll see you again next time.